Teren, teren. Are you guys hearing the clock ticking? Because it's actually seeming like we are actually in like June 2027, but really we are in June 2026. Welcome back to Politically Connected. I'm your host, Diana Ngao.
aka Madam Speaker, and I am Chaka Sichangi.
AKA the Bishop. Sasa, the last time you saw both of us sitting here was at the beginning of the year, where we actually said that the year is not 2026, but pre-2027. And 6 months later, tumekuja hapa kuambia tumeingia mwaka wa 2027, tukiwa June 2026.
Condition.
Yeah. So much has happened, Chaka. Like, so much has happened that even as I was thinking about this episode, nilikuwa nasema, how do we put everything that has happened in 6 months in this episode?
Yeah, I think we might have to do this review more frequently.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to keep up, to digest all the content. There are things that happened a month or two ago that feel like they happened last year.
Bana.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of which, mi nimekuja prepared na constitution na mwa Kenya. And just as we began this episode, I was asking the team, like, where did the word mwa Kenya
come from?
And you gave us a very historical background. Abu, wambie the audience, they would like to know where the word mwa Kenya.
Yeah, it was a hijacked term because it had nothing to do with taking in notes for exams, sneaking in notes for exams. Kenya was actually a movement in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, a political movement.
Yeah.
And so because it was a term in vogue, school students at the time, and it was a secretive organization.
Secret, yeah, a secret underground movement.
Kwa nafanya chini ya maji, so kuingisha notes kwa exams chini ya maji, waka-co-opt the term mwa Kenya.
Mwa Kenya. And by the way, it moved, like, even for us guys, when we were in school, like, mwa Kenya was a term.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now, nikiangalia mwa Kenya yangu, based on the last 6 months, I will start with the issue in regards to, we had a health scare as Kenya without the actual disease in Kenya. Umeisikia hiyo?
Tumesikia, lakini the thing is, can we really call it a scare? Because if it was a scare, we don't have, after COVID, you'd have seen people with masks.
Yeah.
So actually, it was more of an irritation than a scare.
Yeah.
People were just upset.
I think for me, what around the period when, I think for me, what was striking is that the information about the Ebola quarantine facility did not come from our government, but we were listening from a foreign government across oceans, telling their people that we can't allow Ebola anywhere in America.
We cannot and will not allow any cases of Ebola to enter the United States.
But don't worry, guys. Our Americans outside America, we've partnered with Kenya. And I mean, our government now was moving in crisis, trying to respond to that. But I mean, we are living in such a hyper-connected world that whatever the Secretary of State says or the President of the United States says, we can literally hear it live. And I'm like, hey? So what are your thoughts about the Ebola quarantine facility in Kenya, in Laikipia, in the Air Force protected area?
I think it's a framing issue, really. What's really, really bothering people is, do you value our lives?
Yeah.
The quarantine facility is not a problem, which is why I'm saying if it was really a scare, you'd see people reverting to COVID conditions, minimizing movements, masks, and the like, because Ebola is worse than COVID. I mean, if Ebola touches ground here in Kenya, it's
Can be catastrophic.
Yeah, I think, and what was bad about COVID, what we do remember about COVID is now the restrictions that were imposed. But a lot of people did survive COVID, and fortunately, we did lose a few people, and that's unfortunate. We do not take it lightly.
Yeah.
But if you look at the impact that Ebola had, even the last time, I can't remember what
when
year
the
that
outbreak.
was.
Yeah.
That outbreak. And yet you're seeing that with these numbers, they are historically higher than they've ever been by multiple factors, by more than factors of 10. If you look at the graph, actually. So it should actually be really scary. But you don't see people scared, you see people angry. Why? And it's because of how, as you're saying, it was released. So I think there's also fault on the part of the our friends overseas, but it shouldn't be surprising because at the end of the day, any government has to prioritize its own people.
Yep.
And those Western powers, any democracy really, would usually prioritize the interests of their people first. Closer to home, it doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah.
So if it had been packaged differently, it would not have been as serious an issue. So it was being framed for us.
Yeah, I think that's a tragedy of the communications of this current administration, and this is not just about this incident of Ebola. The tragedy is that they're always catching up with issues, always catching up. So the issue has already been framed, and then now they have to catch up to try and either spin or try and explain themselves. And I guess that's where also the anger comes from, because we're like, what are you guys doing? Are you really thinking about us? I remember watching the Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, how passionately he was speaking about the American people. And my heart broke a little because I started thinking, I'm like, can I think of a Kenyan leader, appointed or elected, who speaks this passionately about their citizens that have elected them? You know, I was like, my goodness, perhaps this is why we are angry, because we know what we deserve, right? But we are really getting shortchanged. And even in regards to the Ebola quarantine facility, I understand that it was a part of a health partnership, whether it was in regards to outbreak disease research, I don't know. I mean, even those facts haven't come out till now. It's just more of explaining that, these are our friends, they've been our friends for long, so we can't say no to your friends. But I'm like, what about the time in which we're living in? We're living at a time, Chaka, Sha seems to be working, not working, because it's dependent on a supposed AI system that picks and chooses when it works. I don't know. I'm just saying from what I have gathered from public commentary and also a documentary by African Uncensored on SHA's system. But SHA, the health system, seems to be breaking down at a high speed rate. Like, if I could think, if there was a disease outbreak here, I don't know whether our health system would be able to absorb that. We have private hospitals having some drama, Nairobi Hospital having the drama. We have nurses who've gone on strike. We have doctors who are going on strike, like, perpetually. Like, our health system just seems to be breaking down. So it just seems, I'm like, at the time where we're having all these internal issues, and then we're giving our friend access. I'm like, no. We have to look at what the time is saying. The time is saying that, hey, guys, as much as I promised you this, currently, internally, we are still fixing our issues. So I don't think we can do this. I mean, that's what I'd expect. But I mean, I'm not in government, and I don't know how high stakes that conversation is. But me as a citizen, I just don't feel like, in that specific instance for Ebola, I don't feel like the government was taking into consideration the protection and safeguarding the people of Kenya.
I think, one of the interesting things about that Ebola issue is that it also reveals the evolution on the thinking of politics and government.
Yeah.
Because you see, for example, you refer to it as a health partnership.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, it was arising from a defense cooperation agreement.
Aha.
Yes. So, and it shows that whereas, for example, intuitively, you'd anticipate that health issues are handled under the health docket. And yes, we saw CS Duale commenting about it, even telling us there'd be 23 other facilities being built across the country, quarantine facilities. But in this case, it was a defense cooperation agreement signed by Uhuru Kenyatta and extended by William Ruto to run till 2029. And why am I saying it's interesting in terms of the evolution of our thinking on politics and government? Is that in the same way food can be seen as a security issue, a
Yeah.
national security issue,
Yeah.
health can also
As
be seen as a
between,
national
yeah.
security
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting way to then invoke a defense cooperation agreement, because you're saying this is a national security issue.
Yeah.
And so we now require cooperation. Hence why we're seeing the facility at a military Air Force base. So I think that was a very interesting insight. But also, one of the other things I do find interesting is, when you think about it, then in practical terms, it's one thing to imagine that disease here and the risks it would pose, and the risks are real. But I think also in what you were saying about a communications problem, enough has not been done to highlight how those risks are being mitigated. Because, for instance, these American citizens who would be coming in to be quarantined, they're not teleporting into the facility. How do they come in? I imagine the most ideal way, given it's an Air Force base, they're coming in by air.
Yeah.
They're not being flown by a pilot with Ebola.
Yeah.
The crew
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
does not have
Yeah.
Ebola. The people who will be treating them ideally don't have Ebola.
Yeah.
So, how does this infection then spread out? And that would have been a very simple way, for instance, to prosecute the comms issue, that
Yeah.
yes, there are risks, but here are the mitigations in practical terms. Because that's a very realistic way of explaining. They don't just appear there,
Yeah.
right? But now when you talk about BCL4 and BCL3, somebody's grandmother will think you're talking about Bisil,
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah. The
Masai land.
spice. Oh,
The
Bisil in
yes,
Masai.
because what's BCL4 and what
Yeah.
does that have to do,
Yeah.
with the risks posed to
Yeah.
country?
I think.
So there are actually some plausible explanations to some of these issues, but how it's communicated can be one thing.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I think that's where the lack of care is of the people, because communication, how people communicate, is also a matter of how the level of respect they have of the person they're communicating to. So that's why I am like, even as a communication professional and someone who's also served in like public communications, you have to inform your publics at every juncture, of all those things, because it involves them and you also want buy-in. But to me, it seems that the comms are more of buy-in of the foreign powers to show, hey, look at us, Kenya. Even in terms of what just happened recently with the G7, it's monumental for Kenya to be there, the only African country there. But also, as much as it's monumental, when you look at the times, it also is negative. It's giving Kenya a negative face. There's so many things that are happening at the global stage where Kenya is being a part of, that leaves me wondering, okay, so our president is high flying and doing this, but how does this global brand kind of, how can I say, how does this global brand end up benefiting the people? And I think part of the anger is that we don't see that benefit. And then also the fact that the comms is also not communicating the benefit. It just seems like a President William Ruto show.
The thing about G7, there are two aspects it makes me think about. One is more optimistic. The other one, I will give a comment with caution.
With caution.
The optimistic one is one of the things that was being highlighted there is the new opportunities for development finance
Yeah.
as alternatives to debt.
Yeah, and aid.
And especially with talks of the European Bank of Reconstruction and how we might benefit from such partnerships, private sector partnerships, international players coming in. If structured well, we're even seeing that with the National Infrastructure Fund, with the government owned enterprises as well. So, in terms of optionality for development finance, that's exciting if we can actually see it translating. But now, with seeing our president at the G7, and some of the issues that I then worry about, and this is my comment with caution, is the potential for neocolonialism. Because for me, what it highlights is the interest of those very powerful nations in Kenya. And given the interest, the investments they have here, why our friends in the West would comment very quickly about the partnership with Kenya in, such a sensitive matter. When you also see the fact that you have the UN coming here very soon, major headquarter outside of other than Geneva,
Yeah.
and some of their UN sub agencies also, UNFPA on population, UNICEF on children, UN Women also. So Kenya is like those companies, those corporations in the 2008 global financial crisis that were being called too big to fail. So those international players are very invested in Kenya. One of the questions I then have is, what are the implications for let me put it this way. I feel that some of those G7 heads of states have voters' cards. I shall leave it there. Comments for people.
When you talk about neocolonialism, and I keep wondering, and maybe this is something that we could discuss in another episode with an expert on foreign policy.
Yeah.
I keep wondering about Kenya's foreign policy because time and time again, we seem to be the sellouts of Africa. Because, the partition and scramble of Africa was an African struggle. It was not just a Kenyan. We were not just colonized as Kenyans. It was an African struggle. And how African states were able to get independence was through collaboration with other African leaders, right? And that's even how we got into before AU, it was called the OAU, the Organization of African States, right? It was through Pan-Africanism. And the moment that Africa is in right now, and even the world, requires a level of collaboration with your other African states. Right now, from my perspective, and it's very subjective, I'm not a foreign policy expert. That's my disclaimer here. But from my perspective is that it seems that we are walking a very solitary path as an African state, where we are more keen of looking like best friends to the West, which have very extractive sort of policies or partnerships, as they call it. It's normally more extractive than it is. And looking like, hey, look at us. We are best friends with these guys. And when the rest of Africa is drowning in this extractiveness of this Western and even some Eastern countries, I think the times are calling African states more African leaders now more than ever to really collaborate, just like our founding fathers did. The AU needs to be as powerful as what it was then. That was saying that once one country gets independence, there was like a cascading effect. And that's what we saw in West Africa a bit with Mali and the number of coups that were happening. And you saw a cascading effect because I'm sure there's some level of collaboration among the leaders and the military leaders there. So my worry is that Kenya is walking this solitary path, and we can't exist in this region, in this continent alone. We will need our friends, our neighbors at some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel as a Kenyan sitting here, I feel very isolated and more so like a child that is yet to be adopted, you know.
Sasa ukisema hivyo bafana watasema nini?
Yeah, but anyway, we can speak so much about our foreign policy.
Well, on that issue of foreign policy, the tension you're highlighting is very real.
Yeah.
And I think how I would articulate the tension is it's a tension between romantic idealism versus pragmatism. In terms of a policy, I think the first time we actually had a foreign policy or an updated one, a written, coherent policy was with this current regime.
Yeah.
And if I'm not wrong, under PCS Musalia Mudavadi, who is also the CS Foreign Affairs. But why do I talk about romantic idealism versus pragmatism? In the same way, nationhood is elusive for our country as Kenya.
Yeah.
Pan-African
Yeah.
identities is also elusive for the continent. And I think you saw some of that frustration when the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga was running for AU
chairmanship.
And we saw quite a bit of disappointment by some of our would-be African partners, and it was that partnership and that brotherhood was sacrificed on the altar of interests, and it's happened in the past before as well.
Yeah.
So everybody is looking out for their interests. So I think that Pan-Africanism, as it was envisioned by the Nkurumas and the Nyereres and the Kenyatta one,
The Lumumbas.
was something of a time when we were fighting for freedom. But one of the strategies that had been used in terms of divide and conquer, even during the scramble and partition, our identities evolved in different directions so much that what unites us is a history of oppression, and beyond the color of our skin, there's a multiplicity of cultural differences and ideological differences and political differences in terms of how we think. For example, the politics of West Africa is as different
compared.
Yeah, it's night and day. South Africa, it's night and day to what we practice here, even despite the similarities in our constitutions. So the romantic idealism is what was there at the time that many of African countries were getting independence. But you saw that romantic idealism with Kenyatta too.
Yeah.
And that's why you would see, for example, during COVID, he was rejecting the sale of the vaccines to people.
Yeah.
He was taking a position in common for the whole of the African continent.
Kind of vaccine nationalism, I've stated this openly and severally, worked together, you know, when they were doing clinical trials, when they were doing the research into some of these vaccines. And then all of a sudden, we find ourselves unable to access those same vaccines. And this is not just Kenya, it is basically the entire developing world.
You saw him trying to reconnect Africans with Africans in diaspora. We saw the relationship with Prime Minister Miyamoto of Barbados.
Yeah.
So you saw quite a bit of that in that looking to what was there during the time we were getting independence, that Pan-Africanism. And I think what we have now is more of economic and strategic pragmatism.
Yeah.
So what's in it, you know, for us and the advantage that we can get.
Yeah. There's actually a professor, I'm really forgetting his name, but I was in one of these talks talking about Africa's future. And basically what he was saying that we're moving into an era where we stopped looking at countries as member states and more of corridors of economic power.
Yes.
Right? And that's why I'm talking about the collaboration, because if you look at East Africa, it's such an important strategic position of Africa that even if you look at the scramble of Africa, most were coming in through East Africa, then go down south. So the strategic importance of East Africa, which includes Kenya, is so important to be taken as political survival move. Does that make sense? Like the politic it needs to take a step back, and the policies and all those directives that we're talking about when we are envisioning a greater Kenya or a greater region or a greater continent need to take center stage. So the politics on whether you're going to survive a certain term or a long term, short term, those politics need to take a step back when we start to think about Kenya and the strategic position it holds in Africa. Actually, something that I keep saying, I actually think that a lot of things that have gone viral in Africa that we can all say have actually been cultured in Kenya. Burna Boy was an almost not known musician who used to come almost every other weekend to perform in Kenya. And only when Kenyans caught his tunes did this guy blow up.
There'll be fire in the comments for that
I
one.
know, but I'm just saying that a lot of things, look at Amapiano. It came from South Africa, imported into Kenya. It started as an underground music movement, and now it's a global sensation. Everyone is listening to Amapiano.
Springboard to the world.
Yeah, so I actually think that a lot of great things are actually cultured in Kenya, and even perhaps why we had people like Cambridge Analytica come and test some of their scientific models here based on the uniqueness of our country, the uniqueness of how people use social media. I mean, ChatGPT that was developed in the United States is now the most used LLM in Kenya. I mean, in the world. Like Kenyans are the highest users of. There's something unique about us as Kenya. Leave alone even the border or the country or the state. Like even the people that what makes a state is the people that live within it. So the politicking for me needs to take a step back when we start to envision. And I like something, the reason why I have this book in hand, it is something that comes very early in this book by Gina Dean. It's called Beyond the Ballot, Clear Communication. And it says that Africa deserves leaders who are strategists, visionaries, and statespersons. Leaders who understand that the price of governance is not the next election, but the next generation. And to me, I was like, hey, that's why I need to, I've kept this book now more almost like a case study book. But I mean, I start to think about the leaders who have come before us and the current leaders and how far we've fallen short from their dream. So, speaking of politicking, I want us to diverge a bit to another point with my Kenya here. Because 2026 or pre-2027 happened when Kenya lost one of its iconic political figures. Someone who has been part of this political struggle of pluralism, multi-party democracy. Wacha tu niseme hivyo. That word has refused. Raila Odinga. So we ushered in the new year with a post-Raila political landscape. And shortly after this, the year started, we saw wrangles within ODM where Sifuna, who was their secretary general, I'm not sure what the status is currently, was expelled or relieved of his duties. And the last time we spoke, there was nothing like Linda Mwananchi. You know? Sasa tuko 6 months down the line, tuko to Linda Wananchi na Linda Ground. And the political temperature seemed to be rising faster than a kettle that's boiling water. It's rising really fast. So what are your thoughts about what's happening in post-Raila landscape leading up to 2027 elections?
Nasikia pia kuna Ukombozi Linda Mwananchi Alliance, which has been registered in UKLA. So
Well, there's a race. What I can tell you for sure, there's a race uko ORPP. That office right now is extremely, since 2024, has been extremely busy with the number of coalition names being reserved, the number of political parties being registered. I mean, we're now at about 96 political parties or more, and more that are still in the pipeline. So I'm sure hiyo iko kwa reserve. It has been reserved. Hiyo ukombozi.
I think part of what we are seeing with that race to register parties is Kenyans are being set up for heartbreak. And the
Even Esther over
heartbreak,
there has
the heartbreak will come with character development. Yeah, and because you see, if indeed by this time, because we're a year away to elections, if there are going to be elections, we're a year away.
amesema if. Mumesikia. He was whispering, but amesema if.
We're a year away because we don't know about tomorrow.
Yeah.
If indeed there was some, okay, I'll give you an example before I get into anything too theoretic. We just had the reading of the budget last week, isn't it? And it is, like every year since independence, the biggest budget ever.
Yeah.
That's always the headline there. But at least now these days we're more interested, after 2024 at least, with the finance bill and the budget, because they go hand in hand. And this biggest budget ever was 4.8 or 3 trillion.
Yeah.
Now, the counter, the people's budget, as it was being called, came in a close number 2 at 4.3.
4.3 trillion.
Yes, 4.3 trillion. So the difference is half a call it 0.5.
Yeah.
Give or take. Now, the fanfare was in the release of that figure and the reading of the statement, but we're not seeing where the policy alternative is. We are not seeing the radical shift in thinking in terms of style of government. What we are seeing is a slightly smaller number. We are not seeing how the debt trap is being addressed in this alternative. We are not seeing how zero-based budgeting is being introduced to reduce waste through this budget. We are not seeing how government can operate more efficiently through this budget. We're just seeing a slightly smaller figure.
Yeah.
So how are you different? Using just that as to draw a contrast. So part of what we're seeing with our politics is the alternative is in personhood. The alternative is in cult of personality.
And we've been
A
talking
preference
about
for
that,
this
yeah.
cult of personality over this one.
Yeah.
And it's the alternative is in ni cancel culture ya politics. Hatutaki huyu sasa. Tupatie mwingine. And these guys are just jostling for, okay, how can we organize ourselves around who will be at the top of the ticket, not what is informing this ticket, other than what we are rejecting. And what we are rejecting, again, even if it was we were rejecting certain principles of government or how government is organized or certain policies, we're rejecting a person. So, and that's not saying that those issues are not valid. What I'm then saying is, what I'm seeing as a setup for a heartbreak is, come next year, after the elections, one or two things is going to happen, in my view. You're going to have a woefully underwhelming alternative coming into power, that will find it very difficult to unite the whole country. Or in the alternative, you're going to have a coalition government that again is speaking to the interests of these factions.
Individuals. Yeah, I actually have a problem with the number of political parties we have now, because political parties are now becoming as business models or business bargaining tools that perpetuate that cult of personalities. So there are some parties that have been entrenched in terms of we understand their ideology, we know what they stand for and stuff. But now these other parties that are cropping up seem more of like, we need to be party leader to be part of this table so that my interests are served. And after they become and negotiate their own part of the cake that is being served at that table, then the purpose of that political party dissolves. I feel like for us to move away from this cult of personalities, then we must be able, the regulating organization or the referee ORPP must be able to regulate. And I know this is a tricky idea that I have of very tricky, because when I'm saying that we need to curtail less we need to stop registering more political parties, it's also going against the principle of multipartyism and political representation. But then it gets to a point where I'm wondering, where do we draw the line between political representation and political bargaining? Because now you're using my political right to be represented or to associate with a political party for your own gain. And that's what even gets us into this mess, where it's now more about Rigathi said this, Ruto said this, Kindiki said this, and it's just all these things about personalities. So I'm of the opinion, by the way, we need to stop registering any more political parties, because first of all, Chaka, most of the political parties are democratic. Democratic what? We are social democrats. We are this. But it doesn't even show in how they work. You know, it doesn't embold. And I mean, the time is, I think since June 2024, the Times are calling Kenya, or Kenyan, or rather the generation is calling the current leadership into a higher regard. They must think about it from a generational point of view, and not just from every 5 year, every election cycle. We need to see your vision for Kenya post even that election, to elections down the line, you know, like many elections down the line. And the current way we are doing it through political parties is really, in my opinion, contaminating the dream that this new generation has for its country. Because now we are locked in with this cult of personalities, these people who want to be worshipped in their political parties, you know, and they become almost demigods in our political race. And we can't, now if that's what we are being given, it's like going to a restaurant and asking for meat, but the options of meat are meat that was cooked 5 days ago. So it's not fresh meat, right? But you're hungry and you have to eat. So you have to figure out, okay, which one of this not fresh meat shall I eat? Knowing that the repercussion is that it's not going to help me. If anything, I'll be stuck in a toilet for the next five years. And why I'm saying this is because even what we saw with the finance bill passing, we had 187 MPs who voted yes, and 40, is it 40 or 80? I can't remember. 40 voted no, around 40 voted no. And then there was, I mean, we have 350 MPs, right?
349.
49, yeah, MPs. Where are the rest? Where were the rest? We even had the outspoken, the Doyan of Muranga. Oh, the Nyoro. The way he has been criticizing the government. Former chair of the Budget and Appropriation Committee in the National Assembly.
He was on international business.
Imagine.
Promoting Kenya is our business.
So he has forgotten his his initial mandate is to represent the people of Kiharu constituency when such national bills are being passed. Lakini yeye, sasa international ni more important. Then a bill that will actually, I mean, it's also, because we don't only just pass a finance bill, we also pass the budget and appropriation bill. So when those things are passed, it also hurts, it also connected to the constituency level. What is happening? So when he's giving us his apology, me I'm like, bana, time ya kutubeba ufala imepita. Imetupita maze. Usitubebe ufala. And I hope the people of Muranga are alive to this fact. Yeah, because Dindi is good. He's doing work. But you can do work, but then when it matters the most, you're missing. Ay, bana, unatubebe ufala.
I think on the issue of political parties, one of the things I want to try and use to borrow an analogy or comparison from competition economics. So in competition economics, one of the ways to lower prices of goods, and this is private sector goods, is to introduce more competition, to introduce more players into the field. Because when you have monopoly, the monopoly can set the price pretty much however it wants, especially depending on how essential the good is. And they are essential adjacent. You don't need them for life, but you're so used to them that you can't imagine not having them. So, and with oligopolies, you then have collusion. They can agree on what the price is so that it works for them. So one of the ways to then lower the price is by ensuring that there are more players in the field, and that's actually works for consumer welfare by encouraging competition. Where am I going with this in terms of political parties? The dichotomy I would want to draw here is that what we require isn't more representation. What we require is more participation. Because higher participation will have an impact on the quality. It will lower the barriers to entry in terms of our politics, and it will also raise the quality of our politics. But when we are passive, because you see, for example, you can have, for example, if you look at a country like Uganda, much smaller than Kenya, but the number of MPs in government is almost anyway, significantly higher. Let me not give anything inaccurate. If you look at the number of ministers that they have, is more bloated than the Kibaki
our
Raila.
22,
not even 22. Our Kibaki Raila Grand Coalition, which had about 40 or something. So there you clearly have very high representation. But in terms of participation, it's a different story. Now, what does that have to do with political parties? Properly managed, political parties then become the vehicle through which that participation can be heightened. Because then there's no other viable way through which that voice, however passionate, however angry, however opinionated on the issues of the day, can be captured and translated into actual policy and action and moving government without some form of channel other than the universal suffrage but through these political parties.
But Chuck, I have a question.
Yes.
Since 2002, every election has been fought on the lens of or rather on the landscape of a coalition. We had the NAC coalition that defeated KANU as a single party. In 2007, it was ODM, which was a single political party, and PNU, which was a coalition of other parties allied to the President Kibaki. And then we have 2013, we also had a sort of I think it was CORD coalition that was still under ODM. And then we have 2017, where we had NASA coalition again. And then Jubilee was also a coalition, but then now became a party. And then now we have 2022, where we have Azimio coalition party, and we have Kenya Kwanza coalition. So it's to me, and I'm saying this in a layman's terms, or rather a student of politics, it looks as if our political landscape, it's growing more and more that no single party can cross the presidential mark of 50+1 as a single party.
Which is good.
It needs a coalition,
Yes.
right? So if we are already moving into the point of coalition parties, right? Why can't the management of political parties, ORPP, or the thinking around political parties and representation, multipartism, move into also thinking of how can we ensure these coalitions last beyond the 5 years that they are formed? Because most coalitions are formed too close to the election, meaning that it is really just a vehicle to get us to win the election. It's not really a vehicle to govern after. So how can we mature as a democracy, a multi-party democracy, to ensure that if we did come in as this coalition, then this is how also we govern in this coalition. Kind of what is happening, I don't know whether it's similar, but what's happening in South Africa, that the ANC were not able to get majority, so they had to come into a coalition with the DA, and that's now how they are governing. I'm just thinking that the single use of a political party as a unit on its own to participate in a political process is not enough for multi-party democracy. It requires collaboration. So I'm thinking we are moving closer and closer, in my opinion, we're moving closer and closer to countries that have either one or two political parties, or maybe 4 political parties at most, and those political parties or coalitions stand based on political ideology, like what we see in Germany, where we have the center, the center rights, we have the center left, we have the far rights, we have the Greens, we have the liberals. Such kind. I think how I am seeing this with all these political parties, that's why I am saying they need to be curtailed, because it's stopping the maturing of our democracy. Because if someone is now turning this into a business model, because politics, even our politics, is quite expensive, so people are seeing it as a get-rich-quick scheme. I'm a businessman, and Maze, I can say, by the way, if I become an MP, I can actually achieve my business endeavors faster. Right. So I hear you in terms of participation, and my question maybe is, after what you said about participation, is participation only what you're saying about we need more increased participation on the citizen side, or on both sides, the citizen and the people in those political parties?
Yeah, that's part of where I was going with it, actually, because if you look at those Western quote unquote standards, they appear idealistic on the face of it, but behind it they're actually captured, and they're captured by private sector. So they're actually playing to private sector interests always, and part of the reason you see that stability is for predictability, right? But it's always at the end of the day, behind the scenes, it's interests that are jostling, right? And it's once in a while that you then see a maverick or a movement emerging to come and destabilize this hegemony, as it were, this status quo, as it were. A revolution of culture. Sometimes in the wrong direction, it can be nationalistic. We've seen quite a number of nationalistic movements, and not nationalistic in the patriotic sense, nationalistic in the expelling the other type of sense. We've seen quite a bit of that. So I don't know if they represent an ideal that we should aspire to, because we might, in the long run, yes, we may gravitate towards a stabilization maybe in the number of political parties that we have. But by allowing a multiplicity of political parties, then you give people optionality, meaning that I do not have to be captured by the interests that are animating the choices of the leadership of a particular vehicle. Because sometimes people gather around some ideas or some ideals, and they move in a common direction, and then the leadership of that movement is then compromised, and people are left betrayed. But what we'll be saying by curtailing that optionality is that the betrayal stays, but without an option in order to express an alternative. And I think part of what we therefore need to see is, and there's been a lot of effort in this direction in terms of regulating political parties and what is required to actually register one. The threshold is higher and higher. And part of why we then need participation is that people, because you're saying that these parties should not be a single-use vehicle for political process. And I think part of the question we need to interrogate is what we agree is the political process. If we agree a political process is an election, then we're going to be trapped in that cycle. But a political process should be about our everyday lives. Why? Because what's the definition of politics? There are various definitions of politics, but the technical definition of politics is that politics is a science of government. How we're being governed. So if we have higher participation in terms of, for example, and that's why public participation is so key, not leaving it to the last minute. For example, we comment so passionately and with such hysteria when the finance bill is about to be read and just before it's passed. And yet this process begins all the way in August. And you have the budget outlook and review, which is looking at how money has been used and how where do we want to go. At that point, when we're reviewing how the money has been used, is actually where we should be most passionate. After that budget outlook and review, we go into the sector working groups where the issues are then canvassed and there is space for public participation. That's why we should be having the most political heat. Now, a political party in such an instance would be a vehicle for organizing ideas and for people to then come and say, these are the issues that concern us, such that by the time you're then having the budget policy statement, by the time you're having the initial drafts of these documents, that's, to me, should be the political process that we're more passionate about. But if we are waiting for until 5 years with a voting card, and then we are saying ni chama gani ama, you know, then at that point there's no fidelity to the impact that these processes are having on our lives from day to day, so that when people give us a manifesto that we do not read, and we then adopt the sloganeering and the personality of the politics, we are also as much to blame, because this arises from the culture that we enable.
I agree. And I'm actually saying in terms of, I agree. And I'm starting to realize that perhaps we've never really matured from the thinking of the old constitution. Hence why we don't have the fidelity and the spirit of constitutionalism. So all those things you're talking about in terms of political processes and public participation, all those things are enshrined in this small kitabu called the Constitution of Kenya. But what is here in terms of what is written and what is practiced are two different things. And maybe, and I mean, this is sad because it's 15 years, almost 16 years on since the promulgation of the new constitution. And still, I'm about to segue somewhere. And still, we have different interpretations that fit political moments. Case in point, we most recently, I think I saw it today when I was coming here, we have the deputy president saying that those people who are saying one term are unconstitutional. You know, that the constitution says a president must serve. Must. Must. Chaka, you're a lawyer. He used the word. He's also a lawyer, by the way. He used the word must.
He's a professor at that.
Seme nisiseme, hakuna kitu kama one term kwa katiba. Ule mtu anasema one term hajasoma katiba. Katiba imesema tu. Katiba imesema tu.
You know, he used the word must serve 2 terms. And I'm here wondering, I'm like, if that's the case, right? If that's what's written here in the Constitution, it's actually chapter Article 142 of the Constitution, if that's really what is said in this Constitution, why do we go to elections every 5 years? If a president must serve.
Yeah.
I honestly am very disappointed because this document is being mutilated for political theater. And I'm calling it theater because, I mean, what politicians will say whatever they need to say to rouse emotions.
Yes, he was
Right?
speaking as a politician and less as a professor of
Yeah,
law.
but
Yeah.
we also, at the same time, while doing that, start to create precedents of how the Constitution is and can be interpreted, because not everyone has the luxury to understand what is in this book. And that's why we actually
Raila
elect
Baba
leaders.
alitusomea.
You know, right? Yeah. That's why we elect leaders, to help us unpack some of these issues that are discussed, whether it's in parliament, in cabinet, in whatever, in even devolved units. That's why we elect them, because we don't all have the privilege to understand what is here. But it's our social contract, Chaka. So at that level of deputy president, we need to, I don't know how to say, I don't know. Maybe when I get there, I'll understand why they do it. But I'm just thinking that, how do you misinterpret? Because let me read. You're the lawyer. Let me read. Section 142 of the Constitution talks about the terms of office of a president, that the president shall hold office for a term beginning on the date which the president was sworn in and ending when the person next elected president, in accordance to Article 136, Section 2A, is sworn in. A person shall not hold office as president for more than 2 terms.
Yeah, it says 2 terms.
Yeah, meaning that I can go and offer myself after the first term. Me as Diana, I ran for president. I served for 5 years. That's 1 term, and I decide, you know what? I want to go again. So I go and tell the people, Maze, simpati kazi tena.
So from what
But
you've
is
read,
it? Let me ask you: Is it a must? A must. He used the word must. Is it a must that the people now give me a chance? Yet there are other people on the menu.
So let me ask you a question, and here maybe I'm also answering like a politician. From the words you've read there, does it say 2 terms or 1 term?
It says no more than 2 terms.
So it says 2 terms.
No more than 2 terms.
So let me play devil's advocate a little bit as to what I think the DP was alluding to. From the term, he was talking about the first term, and it was the same thing that happened during Jubilee, where and it's been a trend in political culture that mwaka ya kwanza, even Rigiji, when he was 2 terms at the time, was saying mwaka ya kwanza ni ya kupanga maneno, unaangalia kama iko sawa sawa, alafu sasa the second term ndo unapanga kazi sawa sawa. You know, he talks with his hands, you know, very so and you saw that even during Uhuru, when he spoke those words, he later regretted, and he said, kumi yangu, kumi ya William.
Mimi nawaambia kitu kimoja peke yake, wagojee miaka 10 Uhuru amalize kazi yake, alafu wagojee miaka ingine 10 Ruto amalize kazi yake.
You know, so it's been part of the political culture in a sense. So I think part of what, so the deputy president was speaking to that political culture when, and the idea there was administrative continuity, that give us a chance. Even the president alluded to, give me 5 years from now and there will be no slum in Kibera. Today's headline as we speak this week, one of them is 6 months, in a record 6 months. So he's saying that if we give him 5 more years from now, which means anafika second term, then there will be no slum in Kibera.
But the question,
So-
you see what
so
the
it's that-
language here you're using is if.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the if part is good. Like it shows that now we will have an election, and I will decide whether I want him to continue to ensure that there's no slum in Kibera in the next 5 years.
Yeah, but you know, the thing is, this the one-term slogan is such a monster that is difficult to undo. So I think part of what we're seeing is any effort at political creativity to overturn and undo the monster that this
One
slogan
term.
has become. There are people in very remote areas of this country who are even singing it without
Understanding.
understanding. They understand what it means because they've been told, but in the ordinary sense of if they read it or if they could encounter it elsewhere in any other context, they wouldn't know what it was referring to.
I actually don't see it as something that they should have responded to in terms of the government in trying to now spin it and say in 2 term, 1 term, because really at the end of the day, the people are to decide. If we, I mean, I know I'm speaking from an idealistic point of view, knowing how elections are run in Kenya, but either way, we are going to reach that August 2027, and the people will decide whether they'll give you a second term, right? It's William Ruto's constitutional right, right? So I feel like the raising of the temperature by now spinning it of 2 term versus 1 term. I actually don't see anything wrong with 1 term. You know why? Because a lot of, I mean in terms of the slogan, because it represents different things to different people. For some people, it's a rejection of William Ruto. Other people, it's a rejection of the entire governing, let me say, personality that is depicted with the president. So it's not just a president, but it's also other people, other ways of governing. But there's also just this whole thing that people cling to power, especially in Africa. Right? So for me, when I start to think about the 1 term, I actually think it could possibly also mean that perhaps we are getting to the point of realization or a point of maturity that indeed someone does not have to cling to power until they are how many years old. You know, you can actually just come in, do your bit. If the people reject you, you can decide to step back and retire. Or if the people agree and you're like, you know what, I don't actually think that I can do this, and you just retire. I mean, we have, in more mature democracies, we have people who resign for the smallest of mistakes. Well, here we have people who, when they make a mistake, and I'm not talking about the president, I'm talking about now even below the president, ministers, PSAs, state corporations. You know, we have people who will not resign, but will throw us as many statements in the week to say as to why this has happened. But then in more mature democracies, just one slip of the tongue or something small will get them to resign. And that shows that it's like, for them, you don't really need to cling to this title or cling to this position, you know. But here in Africa, and more so in Kenya, but though Kenya is also quite, if you put about it in terms of Africa, we're actually also quite a mature democracy in terms of Africa. But more so, we've been seeing how there's just this race to cling into power. And that's why I'm like, by the way, one term doesn't have to seem so derogative, in my opinion. If I was seated in the comms team in State House, I'd be like, by the way, it's not so bad. And the moment when I make it bad is when now it starts to hurt me. But if I was to ignore it, by the way, it would have not been this big.
I think part of what we see in some of those other countries, I hesitate to call them mature democracies, but I don't want to go too much into, because I think it's just really more sophisticated political deception. But as far as styles of government go, part of what we see here is some of the leaders in some of the other developed economies, maybe to limit it to economic terms, is there's life after politics, and you know, they go to private business the next day, to consulting and the like. And
do you think that's possible in Kenya?
And that's the point I'm actually making, is what the political representation, what the office represents. It's different in some other countries than what it is here. Here, that office and that seat is an opportunity for rent seeking, and is a business unto itself. So the thought of not being in office means that it's a loss of this opportunity to really one, be worshipped and idolized by people. So there's that element of what it represents. So people cling to it to dear life because they desire and they love being worshipped. They
Yeah.
love being, and
And
that's
the
hence
power.
why we have the cult of personality.
Yeah.
And that's partly a socio-psychological problem. But then also now you also have the issue of the rent-seeking opportunities that come with this, the kleptocracy opportunities that come with this, because a lot of these office holders don't actually live off their salaries. Some do. There are great leaders in this republic, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
They
are not all corrupt.
there are great leaders in this great republic of ours, and that gives me tremendous hope, both current and incoming.
Yeah.
So we do have a future, but for some of them, it's really an opportunity to conduct what is known as private accumulation.
I wanted to say this is an opportunity for them to move from hustler to dynasty overnight.
So there's that element of private accumulation. How much can I accumulate for myself while I have this office? How much can I enjoy the perks of power and the perks associated with being in power? And that's the difference. In some other countries, someone can resign because it's not life or death.
Yeah.
It's not everything.
Sorry, Chaka, as you're talking about that, about private accumulation and stuff, I started to think about our counties, because that's when also we've seen a lot of graft happening in our counties. It's like corruption was devolved. And it also took me now to think about 1st of June when we were celebrating Madaraka. And for the first time, we had a head of state actually apologize.
Today, as I stand here as president and leader of our great nation, to the people of Kenya, in northern Kenya, for this marginalization, I want to apologize on behalf of the nation of Kenya.
I don't know why you're smiling.
I'm not smiling.
The head of state apologized for like the marginalization of northern Kenya. What are your thoughts on that?
I have multiple thoughts. First of all, for context, the president was apologizing for
Historical.
the Wagala massacre.
Oh, really?
In part.
In part.
It was
Okay.
the Wagala massacre and also the marginalization that
Marginalization.
happened. And part of and this goes back to...
He actually talks about sessional paper number 10, the one by Tom Mboya.
Written by Tom Mboya. Kibaki
And
was also
Kibaki,
part of
yeah.
the writing of that. Jennifer Shamala's father was part of the writing of that.
Yeah.
But the marginalization even goes back to Kenyatta 1 as well, and the shifter wars. So there's a lot of history, there's a lot of trauma there.
Yeah.
And there are a number of things. The marginalization has been real, and that's why even prior to the 2010 constitutions, there were efforts to introduce an equalization fund and to actually bring it to life post 2010. That's why devolution was a fantastic idea as a cure to that. Unfortunately, a lot can be said about how devolved funds have been used there, but we shall park that for another day. Because it goes back to what we were discussing earlier about primitive accumulation.
Yeah.
The leaders then, despite that opportunity for devolved funds accumulating wealth unto themselves, but there's a history of the being border counties and their cousins outside of Kenya. So there was because they had
Almost
actually
like
wanted
an
to become
identity crisis.
they had wanted to become part of Somalia and Ethiopia at different points in our history. And then, of course, now you have what happened with the Shifter Wars, the Wagala massacres we were saying earlier, the issue with IDs, what was happening in terms of economic oppression when we were still under the old constitution. So there is a lot to genuinely apologize for.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Having said that, our president, and this is an objective, non-biased view, is a shrewd political operative.
I wanted to say even a chess maker. He's like,
Yeah,
anachezanga chess.
anacheza chess.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he knows, because of how dicey
Yeah,
the Mount Kenya question is,
Yes.
and the fact that the population factor is key to universal suffrage during elections, is how do I align and which communities do I align with
Yeah.
for
Or
political
balkanize.
survival, as you were
Yeah.
saying when we were discussing G7 earlier. So, and he's right to apologize because the president is a symbol of national unity. And marginalization has been real, but you can also see him being very strategic, and indeed, some of the other communities you can see himself aligning with are the ones that will get him as close to or possibly just over 50% plus one.
Yeah.
So that's why you can also see him really courting the Western region.
Yeah.
You can see him, and that includes both the Luo and the Luo,
Yeah.
because the Luo are also very populous. It's not to be taken for granted. So, and there are a number of other communities that he's courting. Even that belt of Rift Valley, he's trying to consolidate it. You can see the strategizing he's doing around the coast, the coastal belt, and that northeastern belt stretches all the way from the northern part all the way to the coast. So he's being, that apology from a politician has to be seen both in the context of our history as a country, but also in the context of the political season that we are in and we are coming to.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you in terms of the time. I'm happy that they got an apology, because indeed there are some systemic ways in which that propagated marginalization, even until today. However, I had a thought in regards to our constitution. Ikitabu yangu nitakuwa constitutional lawyer one day.
Amen.
Yeah. So in this reality that we have this constitution that has devolved units, and these devolved units have this divisional revenue share. And on top of the divisional revenue share, the marginalized counties were also factored in, that they can't just have this divisional revenue share, they will have an equalization fund. So this is how many terms? 10, almost 15 years. Right, of different governors holding positions in the northern region, in the northern counties. And one thing I have to say is that it is disappointing to see how they have performed with the resources that has been given to them to change the lives of people there. It is so disappointing. And as much as the president has apologized, perhaps even the Kenyans and the people of that region need to start to hold their leaders to account. You know, earlier this year, a building collapsed in South Sea, right? The leaders that went and held a press conference included women reps, MPs, and governors of counties of the northern region. Granted, perhaps this is their business and stuff, but I'm just wondering if they do decide what you're talking about, primitive, what do you call it? Primitive accumulation. Why not develop your area? Because that brings more people, like the road for Marsabit. Once it was completed all the way until Mandera, you're seeing more and more Kenyans being able to travel all the way to Mandera, or drive even a small car all the way to Marsabit, right? Places that before, for a long period of time, were kind of like locked out. And even more resources are able, or even more, I mean, a road can open up things economically. We have even now hotels in those regions. So what I'm saying, I'm like, sawa, President William has apologized, but imagine their governors need to apologize because they have an opportunity, not that they have, like it's past. They still continue to have an opportunity to change the economic livelihoods of the people in those regions through equalization funds, through divisional revenue and how it's used, through PPPs. You know, there's so much that can be done in those regions through the devolved units and in collaboration with the national government, that we wouldn't be having this discussion now, 15 years after this. And that's what for me was like, when I had the apology and I went even back to read sessional paper number 10, I started to think about some of what the president was saying, and I realized, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad that they're getting an apology, but imagine the people who has also kind of like given them a shady deal is the people they've elected into power, those governors, Maze. Like millions are being pilferaged for primitive gain as opposed to helping their region. And it's quite unfortunate because that's why now we have an identity, part of what, I can't say only why, but part of what creates this identity crisis of, are they really Kenyans? They don't feel like, when I went to Marsabit, I've gone to Marsabit, and they were they were telling us, sisi tumetoka Kenya A. You know, as if like we're from a different part of a country and now we've stepped into their country, you know, and kind of like feeling like more of less than. And even there's this, by the way, there's this, I don't know whether you're on social media, but there's this Instagram kind of like prompt where people are saying like, how many counties out of the 47 counties, how many counties have people traveled? And there are very few people who've ticked northern counties. Either the people who've ticked northern counties have either worked in government or worked in UN missions, but majority of people...
Or not on social media.
Or are not on social media, yeah. But majority of people are ticking, and you see the whole part, there's a whole line where there's the northern region counties where people have also not traveled to. And it's also just, that's what I'm saying, it's all these things is just a testament of the, let me call it heartbreak of bad governance. Yeah, because imagine it's in like it's there, like the money is there. People are paying taxes. There's an equalization fund. We can get goodwill from multilateral or bilateral partners to be able to develop this region. But I mean, we've gotten to the point where our siasa zetu ni siasa ya, it is our time to eat. You know, it's really disheartening. But anyway, on a lighter note, you talk about cult of personalities. We have ODM, the orange is still split. And now I don't know whether it's split into two or it's split now into 4 pieces. But the ODM side A, let me say the side that is with Oburu Odinga, was saying that sometime this year, they were saying that they were positioning themselves to have the running mate position. Yani Kindiki's position, right? And then slowly we had the youth leader, the senator, Oburu Odinga, say that, you know what, 2027, I'm running for senator, right? And then we have this other side where Orengo is like, I'm the senior most leader, right? I'm the senior most leader, and more importantly, I'm even the de facto party leader of ODM. And I mean, we're just seeing the fragmentation of a post-Raila landscape play out with ODM and how it also impacts the other players in the scene. So I'm wondering, what are you thinking? I mean, we have like 400 and something days to the general election. So what are you thinking about this post-Raila landscape with the split of Linda? They are no, by the way, do you know they're no longer called Linda Ground? I don't know what their name is now.
ODM.
OD. But we have Mambo de Mengi.
Original. So, you know what's interesting is that And I want to tie this with the comment on Northern Kenya in sessional paper number 10. And this is a personal view. One of the things that made the late Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga so electric, and why he was endearing to the marginalized, because you would notice that ODM really spoke to a certain constituency, right? It wasn't the party primarily of the most populous communities in Kenya.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a party of that was a real alternative to majoritarianism, the majoritarianism of the major tribes, right? So Raila was able to speak to that constituency because he had inherited the political socialization and the political articulation that animated sessional paper number 10, and that was African socialism, right? So he was able to translate that grammar of African socialism for our present day and age. And because that African socialism was speaking to, as we are gaining independence, we don't want to adopt these Western models of democracy wholesale. And that was one of the things that Tom Mboya was speaking to at the time. How do we put in place a system that addresses our African needs, our African realities, that addresses what it is that we want to build, but that speaks to our cultures, our sensibilities, and the kind of people that we are, hence the African socialism. And so you see that in Raila's style of leadership, there's a deliberate effort, even though we still see cult of personality in a major way. He was still a man of his times. You see a very deliberate effort at inclusiveness.
Yeah.
And that's why even post-Raila, you still see some of the institutions he set up remaining strong. And I think the real test is part of what is going to remain, because even after ODM as a cohesive unit morphs into whatever it will morph to in the coming election or election plurals, part of what we're still going to see remaining is the Raila Odingaism of our politics. So how many people who would have been cultured under a school of politics still carrying that through? So we might, in the same way that Kibaki at one time when he was in Kanu said that Kanu is like a mugomo, it will be here for 100 years, it will be difficult to cut down. The president of this republic
was a member of Kanu.
He may still very well be. And the last president
was a member of Kanu.
Not just a member, he was a chairman.
Even a flag bearer at some point.
Yes, and the president before that was a vice president under Kanu. So even as we see now coming into...
so we have 40 more years of Kanu.
No, I think what we have 40 more years of is the seeing how our politics is evolving. And I think we need to disabuse ourselves of the notion that every election comes with an opportunity to completely adopt new ideals and new ways of thinking. We are who we are, and so we don't evolve overnight. We don't metamorph and come out of a cocoon as something entirely different. We'll still continue to see vestiges. In fact, if by some miracle we do have one term, and the alternative is now Kalonzo. Still Kanu, my friend.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was on TikTok or it was on a radio show. It was a young person talking, and they were like, we need to get rid of all this Kanu, all these children of Kanu. And it made me realize, I'm like, yeah, by the way, a lot of our key political players right now at the highest level were or have been a key part of the political party called KANU. Which brings me now to think about now the United Opposition. They recently rebranded to the United Alternative Government, basically trying to ensure that the Kenyans can envision them as an alternative force. But there's something that's really not sticking with the United Opposition. Why am I saying this? It's because that once we saw the Linda Mwananchi group crop up, there was so much excitement around that that the populace almost forgot there's United Opposition or were expectant to see. Now we are seeing people polling Sifuna Kalonzo, Matiangi Sifuna, like Sifuna now, because the Sifuna is now the picture of Linda Mwananchi. And there's something that all these players, including the president, let me say also the two-term side, are seeming to have not been, there's something that are not able to really crack, which is that mobilization of the Gen Zs. The way the Gen Zs were able to mobilize across the country. 34 counties out of 47 protested during the 2024 finance bill. And it just seems that, even though we have 400 days to the election, about 400 days to the election, all these movements, including the United Alternative Government, are failing. Not failing out of not trying. They are trying, but to kind of inspire the consciousness and the urgency of the Gen Zs. Why do you think that is?
It's because I think that you see, Gen Z is not an idea.
Yeah.
It's a demographic.
Yeah.
So even if we were to factor that in, how it inspires the kind of Kenya we want, because it's ultimately at the end of the day what you call a chaotic aggregate. There's no consolidating idea that animates them other than maybe what it is that they don't want. And that also speaks to many demographics and how many demographics vote.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see an ethnic community voting not or very rarely for what they want, but more out of what it is that they do not want.
Yeah.
So, and that's the nature of a chaotic aggregate. It's difficult to organize them around ideas. And the reality, again, this is part of the heartbreak we're going to see. One of the headlines on in September is going to be, what happened to the Gen Z vote? It wasn't there to begin with. There was a Gen Z moment. We can't ignore it. It was an important moment. It will be studied for a long time to come. But this idea of a cohesive Gen Z vote is very elusive.
Like a voter base of Gen Z.
It's a demographic, and different things are going to inform that demographic. In fact, it's more difficult to mobilize than an ethnic community using any form of organizing principles. Yes, you're going to have some pockets of patterned voting and the like, but one monolithic movement that translates into a vote, ngumu sana. That's my view.
And now that you're saying that, there's something also Dr. Mukisa, if you remember when we interviewed him, said that unless the energies of that Gen Z protest or the mobilization that happened, for it to be truly, for the change that they wanted at that moment, for it to be truly, let's say, achieved, it needed to be part of a political process, either as a political party or a political lobby or pressure group. But it dissipated quite soon after that was achieved.
Do you know who tried to organize it and it was rejected?
Who?
Raila.
Yeah.
At that time, that's what he was saying. Let's have
A national conclave.
yeah, but people just wanted to stay in the streets. But then how do you translate that into anything? Because you see, and that's the difference in terms of the two different types of political processes. At that time, people were thinking a political process for either changing the person at the top, removing him, or going to a vote.
Yeah.
But what Raila was saying is that, look, we have a moment here. Let's have a National Assembly where we have true representation from a cross section of the country, not just Gen Zs,
Yeah.
that then speak to these issues. And that's the change Mukisa Kitui was talking about,
Yeah.
tapping into it. Because come election day, translating that is very difficult.
I think at that moment in 2020, and I mean, I don't know how, by the grace of God, we're talking about this in the month where we're also going to come into the commemoration of June 25th. But I think in that moment, there was just too much anger that had been there for a long time. Remember, after COVID, we saw a lot of livelihoods change, right? And then just shortly after COVID, we go into a national election. And that election really fractured us as a country, right? Put us in so many different places that I remember that even during the swearing in of President William, there was not that much jubilation as in recent. There was just a somber mood because, I mean, people were it really just fragmented the country into different parts, not even into half. It was into different parts. And then now the cost of living continues soaring, right? Based on also not just internal issues, also the global politics is affecting. So there was anger, and there was legit anger that perhaps what I would say is that the leaders, or rather either opposition or there, were unable to connect and see that this anger, right, it's justified and perhaps needs to be ventilated in a different way. So even leading towards June 2020, the June protest, because it started on June 18th, even leading towards the protest, how the leaders in government and in parliament were speaking to this angry generation of people was not hitting them, because it came from a point of, what do you guys know? You know, and forgetting that these are lived realities of these young people, where they're saying their education is not working for them. Thousands and thousands of degree holders are not able to earn a living with that degree. Thousands and thousands of these people are actually underpaid. Even when they get a job, you have people who have gotten a master's but are working at Mjengo. You know, so that frustration was there, and it was building, because there's something also, I can't remember who said this. One of our guests said, our governments time and time again have failed to plan. It is a failure of planning of this, because this thing about the youth bulge, ilikuwa hapo hata before William Ruto, before even 2024, before before the word Gen Z became a term.
It was actually there when Peter Kenneth was assistant minister for planning during Kibaki's first or second term.
Yeah. But I mean, and in that moment of anger and stuff, unfortunately, the politics kicked in. Where now people are seeing this move of the Gen Zs and the anger and rejecting the finance bill as more of a political moment and not really what it was, in terms of, this is a generation that is saying that they are not feeling seen. They're not feeling served by their government. And I mean, not just this government, I mean, in the period of them being civic or politically conscious, right? And I see where Raila was coming from, but imagine at that time, remember there was a point where they were saying, you know, Raila, thanks, but you just stay home. And the moment where he appeared in KICC to kind of like handshake, it felt like almost a betrayal, because a lot of them felt like, you know, this is our one silver bullet to actually get what we want. Yeah. But those conversations were not ventilated, and still even now are not being ventilated. What we are seeing is just the crude and harsh hand of the government. That's almost like that parent that doesn't listen to their child say, "Weh."
So in other words, you've admitted that United Alternative is not really giving an alternative.
Well, I think that there are people within United Alternative that can give an alternative if given a chance. But the thing is that we have personalized our political conversations around individuals. If we were to look at the competencies that are actually around the United Alternative Government, and not only just them, even the other people who have served themselves, like Justice Maraga, who have said that they want to run for president, they are actually such great qualities. When I say put together, they can actually make what do you call it? They can actually make a formidable and alternative force that can actually help, like, rewire the imaginations of Kenya. But the issue is that even within that United Alternative Government, primitive accumulation is happening, where people are thinking that, no, me, I want this much of this cake. And the cake has not even been tabled, right? So, I mean, it's why I'm saying this is just that I just feel like we are getting back into this cycle, and it's a cycle that we've learned in history, and perhaps many people have not understood our history, that the moment that came after the Saba Saba protest in 1991 was the repeal of 2A of the constitution that was making Kenya a one-party state. Now we became a multi-party. Just imagine that momentum, Chaka. 1990, Saba Saba, nothing. Nothing happens. People are killed, others are expelled, and there's just a crackdown of all these activists and intellectuals. I think that's also when Ngugi wa Thiong'o had to go seek asylum elsewhere. And then now we have 1991 Saba Saba protests, right? And then the December of that 1991, after the Saba Saba protest, is when President Moi surprisingly repeals the constitution. Just imagine that momentum. And then the year coming, 1992, was a general election within multipartyism. Na walishinda kutoa Moi. No.
And
I
that's
think
what
the politics came into play, and the personal interests came into play. And that moment, I know it's not when George Saitoti said it, but if I looked back, that was a moment there that it comes a time where the country is bigger than the individual.
And all that history actually has informed a lot of the progress we've made since then, because if you see the percentage with which President Moi is entering into office in 1992, it was fast past the post with just about over 30% of the popular vote. Now that threshold is 50% plus one. Why? Meaning that you don't have such a situation where you don't have a cross-section of society represented. And that's why, by the way, and including that for someone to be president, you have to have 25% in at least
Counties.
in at least minimum threshold of counties, and that's to ensure cross-section of representation. And part of what we're seeing is that from the first post-2010 elections, 2013, increasingly it's been very difficult to achieve 50% plus one. And what's going to happen ultimately, as much as we frowned a little bit upon coalitions, is that it means that, guys, we have to sit down on a table and have a conversation. And part of what it means, and why I'm for a multiplicity of political parties, is that it makes a lit consensus more difficult. Because when you have monolithic elites coming with a party to the table, then it's easier for them to agree in terms of their own interests and to betray the cause. But when you have a multiplicity and this increased, now this is participation from the top, but with also pressure from the bottom, don't you dare betray what it is that we stand for, then it becomes more and more of a national conversation. Pressure at the top and pressure from the bottom. And part of what I see, I want to speak to this, to a concept known as the signal and the noise. And it's where you have a lot of noise, if you look carefully enough within the noise, you're able to discern some patterns,
Yeah.
and that gives you a signal of what it is that can be discerned from that noise that has some intelligible coherence, because the very nature of noise is that it's chaotic and it's difficult to make sense of. But the signal is some discernible coherence. What I'm seeing and where I'm going with this point is there's a new crop of leadership that is quietly rising, but that rise is being dominated by the noise of our everyday politics.
Yep.
So we still think it's business as usual, but I guarantee
There's an
in fairly
undercurrent, yeah.
yes, there's in fairly short order. That's why you see more people coming out to seek elective office.
Yeah.
Yes, you have people who still aspiring to that old culture of rent seeking in our politics. That's why they want to enter politics. But there's a higher quality level of leadership that's gradually emerging. That's why more professionals are coming out. So whereas before in the Moi Kibaki era, when the equivalent of the MCA, the Kajura, was just your local
Yeah.
politician who Kibaki could invite to State House and have them sitting outside, waiting on the grass
Yeah.
of the lawn of
State
State House to see him. Now MCAs, you're seeing an emerging class of very sophisticated,
Yeah,
for want of a better
learned.
word, learned leaders,
Yeah.
young people. It's giving an opportunity, and that's where the participation comes in, because in the old order,
Yeah.
that those opportunities for
So,
participation were limited. So now you have increased avenues for representation, but you also have higher opportunities for participation.
Yeah.
And that increase in participation is what will gradually help sift out the chaff, because the higher quality of leadership, it will not happen overnight, but surely and certainly it is happening day by day. And you're going to see this election, fine, at the top, things might not change as much. But where a lot of people are focusing on what is happening at the
Yeah,
top.
yeah.
But from
there's
down
signals.
here, there's something that's bubbling. There's a
Yeah.
change, and a change is coming.
Yeah.
And this elite that is currently there won't always be there. So there's a new crop of leadership that is coming, and that gives me tremendous hope for the Kenya that we're building. Now, our duty, all of us, across the country, is to be vigilant for who we are allowing in. We might not be able to do as much as we like about those who are currently in, but we can surely be vigilant about the ones who are coming in.
Yeah.
Who are we allowing to represent us as a
Yeah.
new crop of leadership? Who are we allowing to articulate our issues? How are they articulating our issues? How are we holding them to account? And how do we stay involved, not trusting that when they go there, that they'll have our best interests at heart? Yeah.
It's something actually I've had Martha Karua say a couple of times, that Kenya's revolution will actually be from the ground, from the ward level to the county level. So as much as the politicking is happening at the top, really the revolution is going to happen at the counties. There are very many
Bottom up.
Yeah, they are true bottom up. There are very many MCAs that may have come in with this last general election that may not be re-elected in this current DD, just because of what you're talking about, the bubbling up. But now that we are coming to the end of our important conversation,
tujonge mambo ya DCP.
Imagine.
Moving on.
See, that's what I wanted to say. Tuambie your parting shot, because tuko na by-election. What are some of the things, Chaka? Because tumeingia sasa to 2027 full force. Like by the passing of this bill, I feel like July 1st is like almost January 1st, 2027. Because in my opinion, I think that's when now the political alignments begin to happen. Okay, they've been happening under the table, but now we start to see them coming up in more and more at the forefront. So now, in the next 6 months, what are some of the, you could either be predictions or some of the key political moments you're keeping an eye on and waiting to see how things happen?
Wow. In the next 6 months, I think Part of what I'm anticipating is, I think between now and September, there's going to be a lot of political heat. Right now, we are actually in the thick of a calm before the storm. As we are recording this, we are waiting for the Gen Z anniversary commemoration. I don't know if we
25th.
noticed the 2015 commemoration, let's call it that, 2025, sorry, not 2015, 2025 commemoration was actually bigger than the protest, but not as tense or intense. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens this year and what it tells us about 2025 and what it tells us about 2024, and therefore what it will tell us about next year. And it's gonna tell us whether we'll be able to sustain any kind of momentum. It's going to tell us how the leadership is going to respond to it, and it's gonna affect our mood going into the elections. But on top of that, we have the equivalent. This coming up this July is not a by-election; it's a mini general election.
The All
Kalau
by-election.
Because if however it turns out, it's going to create a lot of political conversation. It's going to let's say there's, because this is not, if never in the history of our country have you had such intensity and attention toward by-elections around MCA seats, leave alone MP seats. So if you've had that kind of intensity to the last few MCA seats, that's why that tells us our democracy is evolving in a very interesting way. All Kalau, given especially the space it occupies, given the level of organization that has gone into it, I think will determine these 4 months, June, July, August, September, but mostly June, July, and August, are really going to tell us how next year is going to play out, because it's how the kind of reactions that we'll anticipate from, and after the Gen Z protest, you also have Sabasaba right before.
7th,
right
7th
before
of July.
the All Kalau.
7th,
Yes, Sabasaba, the 7th day of the 7th month.
Yeah.
So and in the previous years we've also had Nane Nane. So it's going to be very interesting to see how our political climate shifts in the next few months. So if we record another episode in September or October,
It
and
will
that
be a
is be a
different
review, will be, it will really tell us where we are at.
Yeah, I'm actually quite keen and looking to observe about the DCP. Let me not call it DCP. The All Kalau by elections. I'm saying DCP because DCP has one of the strong candidates there. But I'm also anticipating to see what the actual name of the United Alternative Government, the coalition. I'm hoping that towards the end of the year, we get to see some sort of arrangement around that. I'm also interested to see where ODMA lands in their negotiations with, because they said they had started negotiations with Kenya Kwanza or UDA. So it would be interesting to see how those play out. I actually think that the productivity of government will end in September, and now will be full campaign season, even though it's outside the actual period of campaign, but we'll now literally get into the heat and the heat of moment. So I think we have come.
Maybe one more thing that to anticipate just as we close. I will not be surprised if we see a reshuffle very soon.
Cabinet reshuffle.
I will not be surprised. Ni hayo tu kwa sasa. Comments fupi.
So there we have it. There we have it from Politically Connected. Tumeingia siasa full throttle. We are in the year 2027 already, if you haven't noticed. And there's something very, very, very key that Bishop over here has said. He said that where there is noise, there are also signals. So maybe what we call for you, our audience, is there's a lot of political noise right now on your doorstep, in your social medias, sometimes even on the roadside. Yeah, the rallies that are happening, there's a lot of political noise. But we invite you to look at the signals. What are the signals telling you about the time that we're in Kenya? And what does it mean to you as a participant in the political process leading up to the 2027 election? So if this episode made you think about some things, if this episode made you disagree with some of the things we have said here, tafadhali, eka kwa comments, we will debate it there. But till the next time, see you in a screen near you.